Now, back in the day, Budokai Tenkaichi 3 was awesome, if for nothing else because of how expansive its roster really was. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people talking about, like, there were 160 characters, including transformations, and the cool thing about those characters is when they transformed, their movesets would actually change a little bit, right? Now, one thing I don't really see a whole lot of people talking about, though, is how many different alternate costumes some of these characters actually had, Like with Goku, you could play as him in his Yardrat outfit when he got back from the fight with Frieza. You could play as Goku and Gohan in their Saiyan armors whenever they trained in the hyperbolic time chamber. And every character had an alternate costume, whether they had it or not, right? Like whether they had a bunch of different outfits or not, they would figure out something, like some kind of recolor, right? Like Vegeta's spandex Under Armour stuff, instead of being blue, it would be black, right? So they did a lot of really interesting, neat little things, and that's the thing that I really want to see the most of, is that if we don't get a lot of characters, then I definitely think that we should get a lot of alternate outfits. It's kind of hard to gauge what exactly is a realistic expectation in terms of the number of characters that we're going to see on this roster, especially if we're talking specifically about on release day. Video games this day and age, they often come with some form of DLC, so maybe we'll end up seeing something like an original Dragon Ball DLC, or a GT DLC, or, something else along those lines. So it's hard to say exactly how the characters are going to end up getting divvied up, who we're going to see from the start, if we'll see DLC, and if we do, what kind of characters we see coming from them otherwise. Now, one of the things that I think I question most about this reveal is what's the story mode going to look like? We've already got something like Kakarot that retells the story of Dragon Ball Z and some of Dragon Ball Super actually quite well. So, and up to this point, how many games have we had where it's just the flat-out Dragon Ball story otherwise? I mean, all of the original Budokai games, all of the original Tenkaichi games, the Legacy of Goku games, like I just said, Kakarot. There's so many Dragon Ball games that simply follow the story with maybe some minor tweaks here and there. Now, one thing that I did think was really cool about Tenkaichi 3's story mode is the fact that there was actually a what-if saga with all kinds of interesting different fights. Like you would do a Gogeta versus Vegeto fight, and then you would do it vice versa. Just, and it was like, what's the strongest thing? And, at the end of it, it would be like, what? No one knows. Who knows? Just kind of leaves it to the community to continue debating it, which was kind of cool. So I hope that they do a little bit of what-if scenarios, especially if they're going to go the route of just a huge roster, Now, revolving around the kind of characters that I think that they'll most likely go for, and some that I would like to see, of course we're going to be getting the Dragon Ball Z roster. Who knows how much of it, but I'm sure it's going to be a sizable chunk at least. And I think, personally, it's questionable where Dragon Ball, like original Dragon Ball, and where GT might fit into the mix. But I think Super is going to be a really big focus for this game, and if it is, I really do hope that they include some stuff from the manga as well, Moro and Granola and all that good jazz. So I think that would be something that they could add to the story that we don't really see too much of otherwise in Dragon Ball games, is actually implementing manga characters and manga arcs and all of that. I think that's something that they definitely should do. And what little we did see in the trailer involved Goku going Super Saiyan Blue on Namek, so perhaps that's indicative that maybe we will see something of the Moro arc. But, that's all entirely speculation on my end. It's just a complete shot in the dark, so don't take that statement at face value. Just kind of me crossing my fingers, I guess. Now, Tenkaichi 3 had a lot of different game modes in it, a bunch of different styles of world tournaments that you could enter, from, the regular world tournament to the cell games to this and that and the other. And they would get progressively harder as you went along, so hopefully that's something that we see a return in. But as far as play modes go, I think the biggest thing that we're going to be seeing absolutely is going to be multiplayer, being able to battle against people, across the internet. Now, of course, that was something you could do in Tenkaichi 3, but it was only available in the Wii version of the game. So, us PlayStation players didn't really get to have that experience, so it's going to be pretty cool to see what that might look like, especially considering You know, this game is probably going to be really similar to its predecessors and probably kind of similar to Xenoverse 2, just in the sense that it's most likely going to be an arena fighter, right? Like, a lot of these games, like, how many arena fighter style Dragon Ball games have we had by now? I think that it's safe to assume that we'll probably end up getting something like that. Now, some mechanics that I question whether we'll see the return of or not, mainly clashes. And if they do make a return, I wonder how exactly they're going to return, right? Back in the day, there were two types. There was the physical type of clash, kind of similar to what we see in Xenoverse today. You know, where you're just kind of like punching and kicking at each other, and then eventually you do a backflip to get off each other. But in that game, you would actually like roll the analog sticks. And when you would do that, you know, you would build up more hits, and whoever got more hits would win, and they would knock the opponent away. It's a very similar situation when beams would clash as well, right? You roll the stick, whoever rolls it the fastest and gets the most hits, they end up fucking winning it and getting extra damage. So that was always really cool. Now, if they do implement something like that, I really don't want them to do the whole analog stick rolling thing. I feel like that's just a good way to wear out your controller, and I feel like there's better ways of doing it. Like in Budokai 3, they had like those bars that would determine whether or not, you know, that was for the ultimates, granted, but it was still, you know, you versus your opponent, and you trying to defend while they were trying to attack. So, you know, I think that they could implement something like that for clashes as well. Maybe instead you do like a button mash kind of thing. That kind of stuff is not necessarily that great for controllers either. So hopefully, if this is something that they implement, I want them to implement it in a way that's not going to be so rough on these controllers, you know? Now, one thing I think I've seen a lot of people questioning is whether or not they think CACs, or custom characters, are going to be implemented into this game. And me personally, I don't really see that happening. It could, you know, I might get proven wrong somewhere later down the line, but, you know, the whole CAC thing, it's kind of more of a Xenoverse thing. And if they did that, it's kind of like, what more do you do to really separate these games? And speaking of Xenoverse 2, considering how the play styles of these games were so similar, you know, Tenkaichi 3 and Xenoverse 2, you know, you got to do something to set them apart, right? And I think Bandai knows that, so my guess is that we're probably not going to see custom created characters. But one mechanic that I really hope does come back is that we can customize the cast characters with items to make them stronger. And I believe back in the day you could actually give them a halo, and you could actually change the color of their aura by equipping certain items to them. Something that Spike was able to figure out way back in 2007, but somehow Dimps can't figure it out. Couldn't figure it out anytime between 2016 and 2023. So, you know, I got kind of some high hopes in this game, and I'm hoping that there's a lot of things that this game could teach, you know, the Xenoverse 2 team, right? And that kind of brings me to something else that I want to talk about, is the developers of this game. This little trailer that we saw, it didn't tell us who the devs were, but based off the fact that Tenkaichi 3 was developed by Spike before they merged with Chunsoft, my money is currently on the idea that Spike Chunsoft is going to be the ones developing this game. Of course, I could be wrong. Maybe it is Dimps, but, you know, we did have a Xenoverse 3 leak, you know, confirmed that it's an idea. You know, nothing official, just a leak. But considering that we do have these leaks, I find it unlikely that Bandai would have Dimps split between Xenoverse 3 and this Tenkaichi 4, as the community has affectionately started to call it. But yeah, I think just considering how in the trailer we also got some clips of the old Tenkaichi 3, you know, that was developed by Spike, I'm thinking most likely it's going to end up being Spike Chunsoft there. So, again, nothing confirmed, that's just where I got my money. But anyway, that's more or less everything that I wanted to say right now. We don't have a whole lot of information, so there's not a whole ton of things that I can say about it, but you can guarantee as we get more trailers, I will be taking a look at them, and I plan to make videos on them, and hopefully I'll be able to get them out to you in a sooner time frame than how it happened with this one and this trailer. But anyway, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this video, and until we meet again, make sure you take care. See ya.